I still can't believe a father had to see this with his own eyes. It was supposed to be a normal lunch visit. A black father walked into his daughter's school carrying a small pink lunchbox she had forgotten on the kitchen counter that morning. He expected to find her smiling with her friends, maybe embarrassed that her dad showed up in front of the class. But the moment he reached the classroom door, he stopped. His daughter was standing alone at the front of the room, tears running down her cheeks, while her teacher held up her notebook in front of the entire class and laughed. "Maybe if your father cared more about education, you'd know how to write properly," the teacher said. The classroom erupted in laughter. The little girl lowered her head, clutching the edge of her dress, trying not to cry harder. But what broke her father wasn't just the laughter. It was the fact that no one stopped it, not the students, not the assistant teacher, not the principal standing near the back of the room with folded arms. And then the teacher said something even worse. "People like you don't belong in advanced class anyway." That was the moment her father's hand tightened around the lunchbox. He didn't shout, he didn't rush in. He just stood there in the doorway, completely frozen, watching his little girl being humiliated by the very person who was supposed to protect her. But what nobody in that classroom knew was that this father wasn't just any parent. He was the man the school board had been waiting to meet all week. And by the time he finally stepped inside and said his daughter's name, every smile in that classroom disappeared. Stay with me, because what happened next didn't just expose one cruel teacher. It uncovered a secret inside that school that had been hidden for years. The morning started like any other Tuesday in the Reed household, quiet, rushed, and full of little mistakes that only happen when a parent is trying to do everything alone. Marcus Reed stood in the small kitchen of their apartment, one hand tying his daughter's shoelace while the other held a half-burned piece of toast between his teeth. His phone buzzed non-stop on the counter, reminders from work, emails from the district office, and a calendar alert he had been ignoring for almost an hour. Across from him, his 9-year-old daughter, Amara, sat on the edge of a wooden chair, swinging her legs nervously. Her dark curls were pulled into 2 neat puffs, each tied with yellow ribbons because yellow, she always said, made her feel brave. Her backpack was bigger than her little shoulders, stuffed with notebooks, colored pencils, library books, and a folder marked Advanced Literature Placement. That folder meant everything to her. Amara had fought to get into that class, not physically, not loudly, but in the quiet way children fight when they know adults have already decided what they are capable of. She read 2 grade levels ahead. She wrote poems in the margins of grocery receipts. She corrected grammar in cereal commercials. She loved words so much that Marcus sometimes found her asleep with an open book pressed against her chest. But ever since she had joined Mrs. Whitmore's advanced class at Eastbrook Preparatory Academy, something in Amara had started to change. At first, Marcus thought it was just pressure. Eastbrook was not like her old public school. The hallways smelled like fresh paint and expensive floor polish. Parents arrived in black SUVs. Children wore spotless uniforms and carried lunchboxes that cost more than Marcus spent on groceries in a week. The school called itself a place for gifted young leaders, but Marcus had noticed from the first day that some children seemed more welcome in that place than others. Amara had noticed it too. She stopped raising her hand as much. She stopped reading her stories out loud at dinner. She started erasing her answers even when they were right. And every morning before school, she asked the same question. "Daddy, do I have to go today?" Marcus always knelt in front of her and said, "Yes, baby, because that classroom belongs to you just as much as it belongs to anybody else." He believed that. He had to believe it. Because if he let himself think too long about the way Amara's voice got smaller every week, something heavy and angry would rise in his chest. That morning, Amara barely touched her breakfast. "You okay?" Marcus asked, smoothing the collar of her uniform. She nodded too quickly. "Mrs. Whitmore said we're reading our essays today." Marcus smiled. "That's good. You worked hard on yours." Amara looked down at her shoes. She said mine was different. Different can be good. She didn't say it like good. Marcus paused. There it was again. That little crack in her voice. That careful way she spoke when she was trying not to tell him something. He had heard it before, after the field trip when every child got picked for a group except her. After the spelling bee when Mrs. Whitmore said Amara was surprisingly articulate in front of the whole class. After the parent email where Marcus saw his daughter described as bright but socially misplaced, whatever that was supposed to mean. He wanted to ask more, but Amara's school van was already honking downstairs, so he kissed her forehead and handed her backpack over. "Listen to me," he said softly. "You are smart, you are kind, and you do not have to shrink to make anyone comfortable." Amara gave him a tiny smile. Then she ran out the door. Marcus watched from the apartment window as she climbed into the van, yellow ribbons bouncing. She turned once and waved. He waved back, holding the smile until the van disappeared around the corner. Only then did he see it, her lunchbox. Small, pink, covered in faded butterfly stickers, sitting on the counter beside the sink. Marcus sighed. Amara. He checked the time. He had a meeting at noon, one he could not miss. The school board had been asking him for weeks to visit Eastbrook quietly, to observe, to review certain complaints, to decide whether the school's gifted placement program was being handled fairly. He had not told Amara because he did not want her to feel embarrassed. He had not told the teachers either, because sometimes the truth only shows itself when people do not know they are being watched. But his visit was supposed to be later that afternoon, not during lunch, not like this. Still, he knew Amara. She would pretend she was fine without lunch. She would sit there hungry rather than ask for help. So Marcus grabbed the lunchbox, pulled on his coat, and drove across town. Eastbrook looked even more polished in daylight. Wide glass doors, tall white columns, a flag moving gently in the cold wind. A sign near the entrance read, "Excellence begins with expectations." Marcus stared at that sign for a second longer than he meant to. Inside, the receptionist barely looked up when he walked in. "Delivery?" she asked. Marcus blinked. "Excuse me." She glanced at the lunchbox in his hand. "Are you dropping something off for staff?" "No," Marcus said calmly. "For my daughter, Amara Reed, 4th grade." The woman's expression changed, but only slightly. Not enough to be called rude, just enough to be felt. "Oh, Mrs. Whitmore's class is finishing lunch in the classroom today. Down the hall, second left." She reached for a visitor badge, then stopped. "Actually, parents usually wait here." Marcus showed his identification, not the parent ID, the district one. Her face lost a little color. "Oh, Mr. Reed, we weren't expecting you until later." "I know," Marcus said. "I'm just dropping off lunch." The receptionist gave him the badge immediately. The hallway was quiet at first. Children's artwork lined the walls, perfect little drawings of families in front of big houses, vacations, pets, smiling faces. Marcus walked slowly, the lunchbox swinging lightly from his fingers. As he got closer to the 4th grade wing, he began hearing laughter, not ordinary laughter, not playground laughter. This was sharper, the kind of laughter that has a target. Marcus stopped before he reached the classroom door. Mrs. Whitmore's voice carried clearly into the hallway. "Class, this is exactly why we talk about structure. Some students write essays, others write emotional little diary entries and expect applause." More laughter. Marcus moved closer. The classroom door was half open. Through the narrow gap, he saw Amara standing at the front of the room. Her notebook was in Mrs. Whitmore's hand. Amara's shoulders were tight. Her chin trembled. Her yellow ribbons looked too bright under the classroom lights, too innocent for what was happening around her. 20 children sat at their desks, some giggling behind their hands, some watching with uncomfortable silence, and a few openly laughing because they knew the teacher had given them permission. Mrs. Whitmore, tall, pale, perfectly dressed in a cream blouse and pearl earrings, held Amara's essay up like it was something dirty. The assignment, she said, was to write about leadership. Amara chose to write about her father making sacrifices, sweet perhaps, but advanced work requires more than feelings, Amara whispered. I followed the prompt. Mrs. Whitmore looked down at her. You followed your version of it. A boy near the window laughed. Maybe her dad helped her. Mrs. Whitmore smiled. Not a big smile. That would have been easier to forgive. It was small, controlled, cruel. Well, she said, I doubt that. The class laughed louder. Marcus felt his hand tighten around the lunchbox. Amara's eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry yet. She looked at the floor, swallowing hard, trying to survive the moment by disappearing inside herself. Then Mrs. Whitmore opened the notebook and read aloud. My father says dignity is not something people give you. It is something you carry, even when the world tries to take it. She paused dramatically. Class, what do we notice here? A girl raised her hand. It sounds kind of dramatic. Exactly, Mrs. Whitmore said. Dramatic language often hides weak thinking. Amara finally looked up. It's not weak. The room went quiet. Mrs. Whitmore turned slowly toward her. What did you say? Amara's voice shook, but she repeated it. It's not weak thinking, it's what my dad says. Something in Mrs. Whitmore's face hardened. Amara, I understand that at home certain phrases may sound impressive, but in this classroom we use academic language. We don't bring street wisdom into advanced literature. The words landed like a slap. Marcus stopped breathing for a second. Street wisdom. His daughter's face changed. It was not confusion anymore. It was hurt, deep, quiet hurt. The kind a child does not know how to name yet but will remember for the rest of her life. Mrs. Whitmore stepped closer to Amara and lowered her voice, though not enough. Maybe this class is simply too much for you. A few children looked away. One boy whispered, "She's gonna cry." Whitmore continued, "There is no shame in being placed where you truly belong." That was the moment Marcus pushed the door open. The hinges made a soft sound, but somehow every head turned. Mrs. Whitmore froze with Amara's notebook still in her hand. Amara looked toward the doorway. For 1 second, she looked terrified, like she had done something wrong by being seen. And that broke Marcus more than anything. He stepped into the classroom slowly, still holding the little pink lunchbox. "Daddy?" Amara whispered. Marcus did not look at Mrs. Whitmore first. He looked only at his daughter. His voice was calm, too calm. "Baby," he said, "come here." Amara ran to him, but stopped halfway, as if she was unsure whether she was allowed to move without permission. Marcus crossed the rest of the distance himself and placed the lunchbox gently on a desk. Then he turned to Mrs. Whitmore. The teacher forced a professional smile, but her hand was shaking around the notebook. "Mr. Reed," she said, "this isn't what it looks like." Marcus looked at the notebook, then at the silent classroom, then at his daughter's wet eyes. "No," he said quietly, "I think it's exactly what it looks like." And nobody in that room knew yet that Marcus Reed had not come to Eastbrook as just a father. He had come as the man who could expose everything. Mrs. Whitmore's smile stayed on her face, but everything behind it had changed. The classroom was silent now. Not the quiet of students listening, but the kind of silence that falls when everyone knows something wrong has happened and no one wants to be the first to admit it. Marcus stood beside Amara, one hand resting gently on her shoulder. He could feel how tense she was beneath his palm. His little girl, who used to talk non-stop about books and stories and new vocabulary words, was standing there as if the air itself had told her she was taking up too much space. That made his chest ache. Mrs. Whitmore cleared her throat. "Mr. Reed, I understand how this may have sounded from the hallway, but you walked in during a teaching moment." "A teaching moment," Marcus repeated. His voice was still calm, but a few children shifted in their seats. Even they could hear the danger in that calmness. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore said quickly. "Advanced literature requires rigorous critique. Students must learn that not every emotional response is strong writing." Marcus looked toward the notebook still in her hand. "My daughter wrote about dignity," he said. "You called it street wisdom." Mrs. Whitmore's face tightened. That phrase was taken out of context. I heard the context. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Amara leaned closer to her father, her fingers gripping the side of his coat. Marcus looked down at her and lowered his voice. "Baby, did this happen before?" Amara didn't answer. That silence told him enough, but he waited. He had learned a long time ago that children tell the truth differently than adults. Sometimes they don't speak because they're afraid. Sometimes because they think no one will believe them. Sometimes because they've already been taught that telling the truth will make things worse. Mrs. Whitmore stepped forward. "Mr. Reed, I really don't think this is appropriate to discuss in front of the class." Marcus looked at her. "You were comfortable correcting my child in front of the class." The teacher's cheeks flushed. "That was academic feedback." "No," Marcus said. "That was humiliation dressed up as feedback." A soft sound moved through the room. Not laughter this time. A breath, a shift. Several students looked down at their desks. At the back of the classroom, the assistant teacher, a young woman named Miss Carter, stood frozen near the bookshelf. Marcus noticed her then. She couldn't have been more than 25, with a stack of graded papers pressed against her chest. Her eyes were wet, but she said nothing. Marcus turned slightly toward her. "Miss Carter, is that your name?" She blinked, startled. "Yes." "Did you hear what was said?" Mrs. Whitmore snapped her head toward the young woman. "Emily," she warned softly. Miss Carter's lips parted, but no words came out. That tiny warning told Marcus something important. This classroom did not run on respect, it ran on fear. Before he could say anything else, footsteps sounded in the hallway. A man in a navy suit appeared at the doorway, breathing slightly hard as if he had rushed from his office. Principal Howard Bell. He was in his late 50s, neat gray hair, polished shoes, and the kind of smile administrators wear when they want a problem to disappear before it becomes official. "Mr. Reed," he said warmly, too warmly, "I heard you had arrived early. Wonderful to see you." Marcus turned to him. Principal Bell's eyes flicked to the visitor badge clipped to Marcus's coat, then to Amara, then to Mrs. Whitmore holding the notebook. His smile weakened for just a second before he rebuilt it. "Is everything all right here?" "No," Marcus said. Mrs. Whitmore immediately stepped in. "Principal Bell, Mr. Reed misunderstood a classroom critique. I was reviewing Amara's essay, and he came in at a sensitive moment." Principal Bell nodded slowly, as if that explained everything. "Ah, I see. Mr. Reed, perhaps we can discuss this privately in my office." Sometimes these things feel more serious in the moment than they really are. Marcus stared at him. Behind him, Amara's hand slipped into his. More serious to who? Marcus asked. Principal Bell blinked. Excuse me? To the adult trying to avoid paperwork, or the child standing in front of 20 classmates being told she doesn't belong. The room went still again. Principal Bell's smile disappeared completely. Mr. Reed, I respect your concern as a parent, but we also have procedures. Marcus gave a slow nod. I know your procedures. Something in the principal's face shifted. Marcus continued. That's why I was asked to come here today. Mrs. Whitmore's brow furrowed. Principal Bell's eyes sharpened. Perhaps this really is better discussed outside. No, Marcus said quietly. I think everyone here has heard enough whispers. Maybe it's time something was said clearly. He turned toward the class. I want every student in this room to understand something. When a teacher corrects your work, that can help you grow. But when an adult uses your work to shame you, to make you feel small, to suggest you don't belong because of where you come from or who your family is, that is not teaching. No one moved. Amara looked up at him, her eyes wide. Marcus reached gently for the notebook. Mrs. Whitmore hesitated before handing it over. He opened it to the essay. The page was covered in red marks, not normal corrections, not helpful notes. Harsh circles around words like dignity, sacrifice, father, home. In the margin, Mrs. Whitmore had written, too personal, lacks sophistication, not advanced-level thinking. At the bottom was a sentence that made Marcus's jaw tighten. Consider whether this placement is truly appropriate. He held the notebook up. Did you write this? He asked. Mrs. Whitmore lifted her chin. Yes, as part of my professional assessment. And how many times have you written something like this on Amara's assignments? That is not. How many? Her eyes flashed. If a student is misplaced, it is my responsibility to document it. Amara whispered. I'm not misplaced. Marcus looked down at her. It was the first time her voice had carried any strength since he walked in. Mrs. Whitmore looked annoyed, not ashamed. Amara, this is exactly what I mean. Emotional reactions do not change academic standards. Then a boy near the window spoke up. She got the highest score on the reading test. Every adult turned toward him. He shrank back slightly, but continued. Last month, she got higher than everybody. Mrs. Whitmore's face hardened. Ethan, that is enough. Another girl raised her hand halfway, then lowered it, then raised it again. Ithme, Mrs. Whitmore quickly said. She has classwork to complete. Marcus turned slowly. She has been your classwork long enough. No one spoke after that. Marcus walked out of the classroom with Amara beside him. Principal Bell followed, stiff and silent. Mrs. Whitmore stayed behind, standing in front of a room full of children who no longer looked at her the same way. In the hallway, Amara finally broke. I'm sorry, Daddy, she whispered. Marcus stopped walking. He knelt in front of her right there beneath the bright hallway lights, not caring that the principal was watching, not caring that security cameras were above them. For what? For making trouble. Marcus's eyes softened, but his voice trembled when he answered. No, baby. You didn't make trouble. You survived it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She said if I told you, I might have to leave the advanced class. Principal Bell's face went pale. Marcus slowly stood. The hallway suddenly felt colder. He turned toward the principal. She said what? Principal Bell swallowed. Mr. Reed, I'm sure there has been a misunderstanding. Miss Carter, he said, his voice low. You need to think very carefully before you make a situation worse. Miss Carter swallowed. Her eyes were red, but something in her face had changed. The fear was still there, but now it had a spine. I have thought carefully, she whispered. I thought carefully every time I stayed quiet. Marcus stepped between her and the principal without raising his voice. Show me. Miss Carter unlocked the phone with shaking fingers. For a moment the hallway was so quiet that Marcus could hear the faint buzz of fluorescent lights above them. Then the video began. At first the screen showed the same classroom from a corner angle. The recording was slightly tilted, hidden, maybe taken from Miss Carter's desk or behind a stack of books. Mrs. Whitmore stood at the front of the class, holding a math worksheet. Amara was standing beside her, smaller somehow, quieter. Mrs. Whitmore's voice came through the phone speaker, sharp and clear. Class, this is what happens when students are pushed into environments they are not ready for. A few children laughed nervously. On the screen, Amara looked down at her shoes. Mrs. Whitmore tapped the worksheet with one red nail. Amara, would you like to explain why you solved the problem this way, or did someone at home help you again? Marcus felt Amara's fingers tighten around his hand. In the video, Amara said, I did it myself. Mrs. Whitmore smiled. That's interesting, Because this method is not one we covered in class, so either you copied it or you guessed. I didn't copy, Amara whispered. The teacher leaned closer. Then perhaps you don't understand what copying means. Marcus's eyes went cold. The video continued. Miss Carter's breath could be heard behind the camera, uneven, anxious. A boy in the front row whispered something, and several students laughed. Mrs. Whitmore did not stop them. Then came the part that made the hallway feel like it had no air left. Mrs. Whitmore lowered her voice, but the phone still caught every word. Children like you often come in here thinking being naturally bright is enough, but this class requires polish, discipline, background, things that cannot be faked. Marcus slowly turned his head toward Principal Bell. The principal was no longer pretending to smile. Miss Carter stopped the video. There's more, she said, her voice breaking. I recorded 3 times. I know I shouldn't have done it, but I tried reporting it first. To who? Marcus asked. Miss Carter looked at Principal Bell. The answer was already standing there. Principal Bell adjusted his tie. Mr. Reed, I can explain the internal process. You ignored it, Marcus asked. We evaluated the complaint and found no evidence of intentional discrimination. Miss Carter let out a bitter laugh through her tears. No evidence. I gave you notes, dates, student names. I told you Amara was being targeted. Principal Bell's face hardened. And I told you that young teachers sometimes misinterpret firm instruction as personal bias. Marcus stared at him. There it was. Not one teacher acting alone. Not one bad classroom moment. A system protecting itself. Amara's eyes lifted to her father's face. She looked ashamed, and that nearly destroyed him. Daddy, she whispered, I tried to do better. Marcus knelt in front of her again. You never had to earn kindness, Amara. Her lips trembled. She said if I kept writing about you, people would think I only got into the class because the school needed diversity. The words came out softly, but they hit the hallway like thunder. Miss Carter covered her mouth. Principal Bell closed his eyes for half a second, like a man watching a door lock behind him. Marcus stood up slowly. Take me to your office, he said. Mr. Reed, now. This time, Principal Bell didn't argue. They walked down the hallway together, the principal in front, Marcus and Amara behind him, Miss Carter following with her phone clutched tightly in both hands. Students watched from classroom windows as they passed. Some whispered, some simply stared. Inside the principal's office, everything looked expensive and controlled. Framed awards lined the wall. A polished wooden desk sat beneath a gold plaque that read excellence through character. Marcus almost laughed when he saw it. Principal Bell closed the door. I want to be clear, he began. Eastbrook does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. Marcus placed Amara's notebook on the desk. Then why did you tolerate this? The principal sat down, folding his hands. Mrs. Whitmore is one of our highest performing teachers. Her students consistently test above district average. Parents request her class. Donors trust her program. And children fear her, Marcus said. Principal Bell's jaw tightened. You're making this emotional. My daughter is 9. She is also in a highly competitive academic setting. Marcus leaned forward. Do not dress cruelty in academic language and expect me to call it standards. For the first time, Principal Bell looked truly angry. Mr. Reed, with respect, you are here today as a parent, not as a judge. Marcus reached into his coat pocket and placed a sealed folder on the desk. No, he said, that's where you're wrong. The principal looked at the folder. Marcus opened it. A few seconds later, the office door opened. Mrs. Whitmore stepped inside, but she was not alone. Behind her stood 3 parents, 2 school board members, and 1 little boy from Amara's class holding a folded piece of paper in his hand. The boy looked terrified. Then he lifted the paper toward Marcus. Sir, he said, Amara wrote something yesterday. Mrs. Whitmore threw it away. Marcus took the paper carefully, and when he opened it, the first line made his heart stop. Daddy, she said. Yes, baby. Can I read my essay at school today? Marcus smiled through the ache in his chest. Yes, he said, and this time they're going to listen. 3 weeks later, Amara read that same essay at a school board meeting. Her voice shook at first, but it grew stronger with every word. When she finished, the room stood for her, not because she was perfect, because she was brave. And Marcus Reed learned something that day too. A father cannot protect his child from every cruel room. But he can walk into that room, stand beside her, and make sure she never believes she has to face it alone. So if this story touched your heart, remember this. Sometimes justice starts with one child brave enough to keep writing, and one parent who arrives just in time to read what the world tried to throw away. Marcus opened the folded paper slowly. The page was wrinkled, like someone had pulled it from the trash and tried to save it before it disappeared forever. At the top, in Amara's careful handwriting, one line was written. I am not misplaced, I am just not welcomed. For a moment, Marcus could not breathe. He looked at his daughter. Amara stood quietly beside him, eyes lowered, as if she still believed her truth was something to be ashamed of. Baby, Marcus whispered, did you write this? She nodded. The little boy near the door spoke softly. Mrs. Whitmore threw it away. She said Amara was making trouble. The room went silent. Mrs. Whitmore lifted her chin. This is being exaggerated. I was maintaining standards. Marcus turned toward her. No, he said quietly. You were humiliating a child and calling it education. Miss Carter stepped forward and placed her phone on the desk. I have recordings, she said. All of them. Then one parent spoke. Then another. Stories began pouring out. Children removed from advanced classes, complaints ignored, students made to feel like they never belonged. Principal Bell had no answer. By the end of the day, Mrs. Whitmore was placed on leave. Principal Bell was removed from the investigation, and the district opened a full review of Eastbrook's gifted program. But Marcus remembered one moment most. The next morning, Amara stood in front of the mirror tying yellow ribbons into her curls. Daddy? She asked. Yes, baby? 3 weeks later, Amara read that essay at a school board meeting. Her voice shook at first, but then it grew stronger. When she finished, the whole room stood, and Marcus knew his daughter would never shrink again.